A lot of people, when they're thinking of Michelangelo, will think of the early works, so David, the Sistine Chapel ceiling, that sort of thing. And it's easy for people to forget that he goes on working until the age of almost 89. And the later works show quite a different side to him, much more introspective, much more thoughtful. We get to see more of him as a person coming to terms with these very universal human feelings that we all face as we get older, trying to weigh up if you've lived a good life and meditating on aspects of faith which he hopes will bring him to salvation. When we start the exhibition with the drawings for The Last Judgment, this is perhaps the Michelangelo that people do expect to see. These very dramatic, extravagant poses, the muscle-bound figures, the fascination with the male anatomy. As we move on, his interest and his style does change. He becomes slightly more interested in the spiritual interior of the figures that he represents. The figures often become a little more compact, a little more dense and weighty. At the same time, when he is dealing with the figure of Christ, for example, it can become quite light, almost ethereal.
As for some of these drawings, I think he'd be slightly less pleased that we were seeing the inner workings of his mind.
Steve, who lives in Rome, seems to live in Rome half his life.
Yeah.
I might bring him and we might do this.
Michelangelo could be quite a difficult person sometimes. We know a great deal about what he was like because we have 500 letters of his that survive in total. We're including some of them in the show. We trace some of his friendships in the show, for example, his friendships with Tommaso de Cavalieri and Vittoria Colonna, both of whom prompted him to make poems and really beautiful drawings for them that spoke to their shared interests. And we also include some letters that he wrote to his nephew, who bore the brunt of his temperament on numerous occasions. I think there's a perception that creativity is something which happens when someone is young, when they're still finding their feet and experimenting, whereas I think what this exhibition makes clear is that even after the age of 60, and for a long time after that, artists can remain incredibly creative and innovative and can take on new and really challenging projects. You have Michelangelo working on some of the biggest projects of his life at this period. 2 major fresco commissions, The Last Judgment in the Sistine Chapel, the Pauline Chapel, and then also St. Peter's, which is the biggest building site in the world at this point. So he's really challenging himself and being forced to challenge himself. And I think that can be really inspiring.
Okay, and over here we have some of the studies for The Last Judgment.
Indeed, we have most of the surviving studies in the course.
I think it's important to look at Michelangelo's whole career, and this exhibition looks at his older years, and it's important to note that he lived to be 89 in a time when people dying in their 30s and 40s was quite normal. So we see how prolific he was over his later years and how his style evolved. It became a bit looser and it became a bit more abstract, and that's a different side to Michelangelo than the one we're used to.